shaking. I'd like to thank you for taking time out from your beautiful autumn Saturday. Thank you, sister. Thank you so much. Come and listen to some more of my babble. Some of you who were at Trinity last night, I see that you're becoming addicted to the babble. So, at your own risk, but we're certainly happy to have you here today with us. Before we begin our discussion on Ahimsa, Damamaji, where's Damamaji? She's not. She just went out to bring Damamaji in. Bring Damamaji in. Damamaji, for those of you who don't know her, Damamaji is one of the most active Sabadors here at the Sangha. She has accepted the honor and privilege of bringing into print many of the teachings on Satma art that we are introducing here at the House of Ra. And Damamaji has been working relentlessly for the last, I suppose, months, it's a more appropriate term, night and day, literally, transliterating so many of the tapes and talks that have been given in the house to reduce it to writing for the benefits of those who don't have access to the tapes and those who don't have an opportunity to come to these workshops, to make it available, in fact, to all seekers. And her latest effort has produced a copy of the teachings on ego. And Damamaji, since you worked hard all night, I was working too. I want you to know, Damamaji, I was at Trinity working hard, and this morning I continue working hard. I have to match your effort. And so, Damamaji, I want to give back to you now, your own child. Would you please come and accept this, please? And we want to thank you on behalf of Sangha for putting these words of our perfect teachers in print for the benefit of all sentient beings. And Damamaji, may you always have happiness in this cause. Now, today we're going to be talking about Ahimsa. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term, perhaps I'll scribble it on the board here quickly. And Ahimsa literally means harmlessness. Ahimsa means loving kindness. Ahimsa is the active manifestation of love. As such, Ahimsa is really the starting point for any of us who seek to follow the path of the masters. And so we want to get a deep understanding of this thing called Ahimsa because it is so foundational in the practice of sadhana. So much so that about 200 BC, the great yogin and codifier of yoga as we know it, Patanjali, lists Ahimsa as the very first step in his 8 limbs of yoga. So this Ahimsa is a very critical thing, and so we want to get some understanding of it. And we're going to be talking about Ahimsa as it relates to the radical practice and demonstration of harmlessness and loving kindness. Radical because it must include you. Now it's very interesting when we think in terms of practicing harmlessness and compassion toward other people. Very often we eliminate ourselves from that equation. I want to remind you that unless you have started with Ahimsa towards yourself, then you really are in no position to do Ahimsa toward others. This Ahimsa is what underlies the practice of our vegetarianism, as many of you know. For those of you who have wondered why so many saints and masters and seers have mandated that we adopt the vegetarian diet, you may be relieved to know that it wasn't strictly out of health, as most of you all are practicing vegetarianism, because you worried about your weight and your calorie intake and so forth and so on. But this was not the original motive for the practice of vegetarianism. Even as late as Pythagoras, who introduced the practice to the Western world, it was understood that vegetarianism was an expression of Ahimsa. Ahimsa that is reaching beyond the boundaries of just human beings, but even down to lower species. You see, you do not eat the cow because you are practicing harmlessness toward that cow. You don't want to harm it in any shape, form, or fashion. And especially since you can live off of apples, and fruit, and grains, and legumes. You see, no need to deprive the cow of its life, simply to appease your own appetite for blood. So Ahimsa, even at the level of vegetarianism, you see, is an ancient teaching. But I ask you, of what value is your Ahimsa toward a cow, or a chicken, or some lower form of life, if you have failed to practice Ahimsa toward yourself? So we want to get into that. And as you all know, in these initial meetings of when we start a new series, I spend a little time giving you background and setting up the discussion. So we will do that today as well. And then in the next session, Achana Balal is 2, right? And then in the next session, we will begin to go deeper and deeper into it. Now, Ahimsa means the practice of radical harmlessness. Radical because it will include you. Ahimsa is another name for love. At Trinity, Sister Judy, we had a good time last night because we were talking about love. Pat was there. You didn't get enough talk about love, my dear? Huh? So we will pick up where we left off last night. Would that be all right? Acha. Now, essentially then, the practicing of Ahimsa is the transmitting the experience of being loved to all sentient beings. Would you please make a note of that? When you are behaving out of Ahimsa toward another human being, what you are doing, you are transmitting to that individual the experience of being loved. It's very profound. We talked in one session about the bodhisattvas. In Buddhism, we talk about the bodhisattvas, and out of their compassion and so forth and so on, they work on behalf of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. But what we didn't get a chance to explore were the many levels of the bodhisattva. There's at least 10. You see, at the lower level in the stages of being a bodhisattva, then you are pretty much involved in giving people information. You're giving them the teachings. And that is good. But at that lower level, you are not yet transmitting to them the experience of being loved. You have not yet exhausted the stages of being a bodhisattva. And if then Ahimsa involved the transmission of the experience of being loved to all sentient beings, then it follows that Ahimsa, when practiced towards yourself, must be also the transmission of the experience of yourself being loved by yourself. Now it's interesting, most of us do not love ourselves. Strange. In fact, it is because we don't love ourselves that we become very often so desperate for other people to love us. Would you please make a note of that? If you find yourself desperately seeking other people's love and recognition and respect, it is only because you have failed to demonstrate love towards yourself. Are you following me? And that makes you enter into your relationships like a beggar. Now you're always begging someone, Ahimsa, to love me. Please love me. Please love me. And you travel through all your relationships like this beggar, begging and pleading with people to love you. Sometimes you even begin to manipulate other people in order to extract from them at least some small vestiges of love. Is that about right? We sacrifice our own dignity and our own self-respect, again, in pursuit of the experience of somebody loving us. We become very desperate. And that is only because we have failed to love ourselves. We have not practiced Ahimsa in the truest sense of the word. Our practice of Ahimsa has not been radical. It did not include you are absent from your own good works. This is interesting. Now you spend so many hours volunteering at the shelters and volunteering, working with youth and volunteering here, but you spend no time volunteering, nurturing youth. Hence, your efforts in these other dimensions are bankrupt. It's just more of your ego mythology. It's just more of your ego. It has no cash value. It doesn't transform anybody. One of the greatest demonstrations of Ahimsa in the history of mankind was demonstrated by the magnificent sage and master, teacher, Jesus of Nazareth. Absolutely profound. Yes, there have been other great masters, certainly. The Buddha, Mahavir, Moses, Muhammad, Ptahotep, Kajami. But in the entire galaxy of these mystics, nobody has loved like this Jesus. Hence his name still rings in everybody's ear today. Hence he split time in half because it was a new era. He ushered in a new dispensation. It is very interesting, brothers and sisters, that Jesus was not the one who claimed himself to be a Messiah. It was not Jesus' propaganda that resulted in the understanding that this man is God. It was the experience of these early disciples who encountered the incredible Ahimsa of Jesus. And it was Jesus' transmission to a Peter, and to a John, and to a Mark, and to a Luke. The experience of being loved unconditionally that so impact these early disciples that they said, my God, you can't be a human being. Only God can love like this. A human being is not capable of loving another human being unconditionally. Only God can do that. They accepted the divinity of Christ not based on reading the Bible. Are you understanding me? Because your acceptance of Jesus is based on reading scriptures. Is that right? But after you correct me, you're a scholar. It's all right.
That's right. You're right.
Your great respect and recognition of Jesus is based on scriptures and dogma and doctrine. It's cerebral. It's intellectual. You understand? It is secondhand. It's trickled down. It's been stepped on, diluted. That was not the case of these early disciples. Their elevation of Jesus as being the Son of God, God in the flesh walking among us, was based on their experience of the transmission of love. And Jesus said to them that I love you just as my Father hath loved me. Because Jesus was one of those rare souls who was able to bring consciousness to that level where you can have the experience of how much God loves you. Now this is interesting because most of us don't really feel loved by God. You really don't. You really don't. Hence in your prayers I can hear all of your complaints. God do this, God do that. You see, God, would you give me a little bit more money? Give me a little bit more. That God, why you let this happen? You see, constant complaining. You really don't experience how much love has brought you into being. You see? Hence, you don't know how to love. That's very interesting, Judy. that unless one has had the experience of being unconditionally loved, one cannot love in return. So this ability to practice the radical demonstration of harmlessness and loving kindness is predicated on first being the recipient of that kind of unconditional love from another human being. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Hence the necessity of a guru. Because what is the power of the guru that is able to liberate us from our misery? That power is simple. That the guru can love you unconditionally, in spite of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. Not that the guru is unaware. The guru is quite aware. Jesus was very aware of Peter's shortcomings. He loved Judas. You know then that his love was not based on the shortcomings of a human being. And it was the receptivity and experience of this transmission of love that transformed then, and it is the same thing that is required to transform us now. But since we cannot rise immediately to this level of Christ consciousness, then we have to begin where we are. And we have to start with ourselves. Now, how do we practice Ahimsa toward ourselves? There are at least 3 levels out there. In body, speech, and mind. But let's look first at the physical level, because that's where we're at. And it doesn't take long for us to see the way that we treat our bodies clearly reveals the fact that we do not love even the body level of our being. Because look what we do to it. We put all kinds of junk in it, right? We abuse it in all kinds of ways, shape, form, and fashions. Is that right, that around?
Yes, I would say so.
You see? Because we really don't love it. We really don't understand that this is the temple that holds your divinity inside of it. We do not revere it. You see? We do not respect it. We do not practice Ahimsa even toward our own physical level of being. And if you cannot appreciate your level of being at this physical level, then how would you practice higher Ahimsa? If you begin to look at just the way you talk to yourself in your moments of silence. I'm no good, I'm a failure, I'm never going to be none. You understand? Look at that. This kind of negative self-talking that you're doing to yourself. Right? We don't have any respect for ourselves. And you know that in the workshops that we give, we almost always, Naeem, talk about the fact that we must have this sense of self-respect. Right? Self-respect is a derivative of Ahimsa. If you don't love yourself, how will you respect yourself? How are you going to do that? Now, Jonah, that's not possible because fundamentally you don't respect yourself. You don't care nothing about yourself. Physically even. You put all kind of drugs, all kind of dope, all kind of alcohol in yourself. That's not self-respect at all. And then you wonder, you see, why are you so miserable? You're miserable because you are living in a state of self-contempt. If you're not happy with yourself, you will not find happiness. Would you please make a note of that? Because a lot of us have been trying to find happiness in money, in our career, happiness in other people, in circumstances, situations, etc., etc. But you are not even happy with yourself. Therefore, you will never be happy with anything else. Because why? In reality, all you have is yourself. And this is interesting. Everything else that you add to yourself is subject to impermanence and loss. It will not last. And so in the end, you have only yourself. In the beginning, you had only yourself. And in between, you have the illusion that there's something else. But it's just an illusion. If it is self alone in the beginning, self alone in the end, then in between it's just an illusion. It's only yourself straight through the whole experience. And therefore you have to learn how to be happy and content and at peace with yourself and to love yourself. And that we don't know how to do. Therefore we suffer. And unless we encounter a human being that transmits to us the experience of being loved, then we cannot come up out of our self-contempt. Are you following me? When Jesus bowed down and washed those filthy feet of Peter, in fact, washed his whole body, Peter just couldn't understand what is going on here, that somebody will wash a wretched soul like me. I can't believe I have this kind of worth and value as a human being. When Jesus washed them feet, he was validating the disciples, wasn't he? And then once they got a taste of that love, they themselves became lovers. What I'm saying, folks, is that you cannot practice Ahimsa out of a void. You can only do that if you yourself have had the experience of being unconditional. Now, it's not so bleak as it seems, Sajrani, because Sajrani saying, but one, damn, that really leaves us out the picture because nobody's washed our feet, right? We've not had the Peter experience. What are we to do? Not to worry, because in all of our lives, if only for a moment or two, we can find someone that loved us unconditionally. Search for it. It might have been that big moment. When you was a little girl, you were Big Mama's girl or Big Mama's boy, and Big Mama loved you unconditionally. You see? And that love brought you through so many hard times. Is that right? So the very fact that you are here in existence means that somebody has loved you at some point in time in your life. Otherwise, how would you be here today? So you have had this experience of being loved. Now you need to build on that. And understand that you have worth and value as a human being in spite of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. Case closed. And now start demonstrating some love towards yourself. And you begin first at the physical level. Now love yourself. I'm not talking about ego tripping. Are you all following me? Right? I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But I'm talking about loving yourself. In spite of your imperfection, your shortcomings. We say, well, but why should I, love myself at the physical level? I'm old now. You see, body's all messed up. I might as well keep drinking. I might as well keep doping. Hell, I'm over the head. You're alive and breathing. You see? Your task is to love yourself until the last breath. So the physical level is easy to understand the practice of Ahimsa as it relates to ourselves. So I won't dwell much on that because that's self-evident. You all know how to do that. We will want to move to the next level. And at the spiritual level, how do you practice Ahimsa toward yourself spiritually? Have you ever thought about it? You have a soul, you have a spirit. How do you really demonstrate spiritual-based self-respect? How do you really, Janamaji, respect your soul? How do you treat your soul respectfully, lovingly? Just as you will not injure yourself physically and mentally as an expression of your own value of yourself, then how should we behave as it relates to the demonstration of love for ourselves spiritually? How do you love yourself spiritually is what I'm asking. How do you do that? Huh? Oh boy, good. Yes, brother.
Obey God's laws.
Obey God's law. And if you are only familiar with the outward laws of God, that's good enough. If you can follow some scripture, that's why every religion is good in a sense. The problem is not with the religions, folks. The problem is with the followers of the religion. It is people who give Christianity a bad name. Jesus' teaching is exquisite, sublime, full of nothing but love, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It is those who follow or rather fail to follow Jesus' teaching that gives Christianity a bad name. Because when we see this so-called Christian behaving at these low levels of spiritual development, then we tend to indict Christianity. It's not Jesus' fault. It's this person's own blindness and ignorance. They are reduced the teachings of Jesus down to their own selfish ambitions. And then the same is the case in Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, completed man's religion that day for him. The problem is not with Islam. The problem is with those who are calling themselves Muslim but have failed to actually implicate the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. You see. So you're right, brother. If we can follow God's laws, even at the scriptural levels, that will be some kind of legitimate demonstration of our loving ourselves spiritually. If we can follow our own conscience. Now this is interesting, brother, that you brought this up. We talk about it many times. We'd say that most of our misery in our life is the result of our failure to live our life according to the level of our own conscience, our own nature. And when we fail to do that, the consequence will always be suffering. And I want us to really understand that. When you do not practice ahimsa toward yourself, you will suffer. If you do not practice ahimsa toward your body on a physical level, and you abuse and you misuse this Naranje Devi, this temple of God, if you abuse it, the punishment will be a sickness or illness that you will suffer with more than you can imagine. There's consequences. Is that right? If you fail to practice ahimsa toward your mind, you will go insane. Insane. Keep telling yourself all that negative self-talk. Keep wallowing in your pools of misery. Keep convincing yourself that everybody has done something bad to you and people are not treating you right and they've done you so wrong and people shouldn't do this to you. Keep wallowing in your pools of self-pity and you will go stark, raving mad. And it's the natural consequence of that kind of negative indulgence. Is that about right? Yes. And the same is the case spiritually. When you have failed to practice ahimsa toward yourself spiritually, you will suffer. Your life will be just one unending episode of misery, depression, melancholy, sadness. You'll never be happy. You have abused yourself. That's deep. We talk about the horrors of someone abusing children or abusing women or abusing men, but you're abusing your own self. What is wrong with you? You're abusing your own self. What must be the consequences of that kind of abuse? You are abusing your own self because you don't love yourself. You really don't love yourself. You have a few imperfections here and a few faults there, and you have seen these faults and imperfections, and you just saying, well, it ain't even worth my loving myself. I'm not even worthy of being loved by me. Now this is sick. Now this is sick. This is pathological. Are you all following me? And so when we fail to practice ahimsa toward ourselves spiritually, as you said already, I've heard a number of you say that, you don't meditate. Now this is especially for those, this only pertains to those of you who have been given the means of meditation. I'm not talking about those who don't know how to meditate, because what can they do? What can they do? They can't do anything but suffer spiritually. They have no means of relieving their spiritual suffering because they don't know nothing about meditation. All they can do is read a few scriptures and then that stuff will evaporate in 4 days maximum. You understand? It's at the superficial level of their being. While they're in church or in satsang or in the synagogue or in the temple, they are filled with a little inspiration. But 3 days after they leave the temple or the church or the synagogue, they retreat right back into their pool of misery. It is temporary. Is that right, Kiva?
Yes.
Very temporary relief from their misery and suffering. It's like a drug. Hence, religion, Nietzsche called it the opiate of the people. It's like a drug. It lasts for a few days. Unless you have really been given the technique of meditation by which you now can bring religion down into every core of your being and life. That's the only kind of religion that works. In any case, meditation, there, by those of us who have been given the great gift of meditation, our failure to meditate is the highest act of spiritual self-abuse possible. Because when you don't meditate, what you're really saying, you don't care nothing about your soul. You really don't care. I'm not getting up this morning. Now, I'm not going to get up and meditate this morning because it's not important what happens to my soul. You understand? Let me get a little bit more sleep. As if sleep is going to enlighten you. Nobody has become enlightened because they slept well every day of their life. Your sleeping is not going to help you at the time of death. You have got to die one day, and you're not going to be ready for that because you have slept your life away, wasted your time on trivial nonsense, just pure bullshit, when you had an opportunity to do something real. You are abusing yourself spiritually. You are in a state of spiritual self-contempt. You're saying, I don't care nothing about my soul, my spirit. At all. I'm not even worth meditating. Are you following? That's not Ahimsa. That's not Ahimsa. Remember, I am saying that this radical demonstration of harmlessness and loving kindness must include you, by definition. It must start with you. How are you, Theravadaji, going to love your neighbor if you don't love yourself? How are you going to do that? How? You can't love your wife and your children and your brothers and sisters if you have not loved yourself. And remember, I'm not interested in your rhetoric because I know that you got so much ego mythology that you're quick to claim, well, you know, but one, I really care about myself. I really love myself. You are lying. You are just lying. Now stop it, for God's sake. Stop that lying to yourself. You don't care nothing about yourself at all. You really don't care nothing about yourself. You just are repeating a few words that you've heard spoken by these great masters, much like a parakeet can mimic human language. You're mimicking mystics. But in your life, I see absolutely no demonstration of any love for yourself. None. None at all. Why? Because this brother put out, you're not following your wisdom. Are we, brother? We're not following our wisdom. Our wisdom said, but one, don't do that. This is not good for you. And what do I say to my wisdom system? Mind your own business. Right? You see, I'm trying to get my high on. You understand? You see, I'm trying to fill myself with this good tasting barbecue right now. Higher wisdom, don't be messing with me. Right? I know this stuff ain't good for me, but what do that got to do with anything? You follow me? We don't do that. And because we don't do that, we suffer. We suffer. And we will continue to suffer. So we have no option, brothers and sisters. We must rise to the occasion where we now start practicing some love toward others. We must do that. We really must do that. You must understand you're worthy of being loved. You really are. That this phenomena that has brought you into being, you don't know what went into your existence. We cannot even comprehend it. It's inscrutable. It's absolutely inscrutable. This
being a human being is the most magnificent and mysterious phenomena in existence. It is almost as if the whole universe has labored to produce you. You are a product of the infinite love of God, made flesh. It is amazing. You don't know who you are. You really just don't know who you are. And this becomes the problem now. So as we talk about practicing Ahimsa toward ourselves, this radical demonstration of harmlessness and loving kindness, starting first with ourselves, I have to say a little bit about the very sense of self, this very notion of self. Because very often our failures to practice Ahimsa is rooted in a very immature concept we have of ourselves. It's interesting. When our sense of self, our egos, are very immature, very childish, still embryonic almost, that is accompanied by a disregard for one's own safety, security, value, etc. Just as, for instance, you will see a 2-year-old child whose ego is still at a lower developmental stage. Their sense of self is not fully mature yet. Will reach into a toilet stool and eat out of it. Is that right? They will eat out of the garbage. They will run into traffic, get hit by cars. They will put themselves at risk because their egos, they don't know who they are. They really are not in a mature relationship with themselves or the world. Is that right? Their whole sense of morality is different from ours. So what we find then is that those of us who are still immature tend to abuse ourselves the most because we're like those little children. Are you following me? We're like little children. And therefore we have to learn how to come out of our childishness. Jesus said that when he was a child, he did childish things. But when you become a man and a woman, it's time to put this stuff aside. It really is. And start loving ourselves. Now, before we go any further, let's all take a moment and let's put forth our questions and things, because this kind of subject, we can only proceed through it if you're very clear on these initial starting points. So, please, by all means. Yes, Malanara.
In terms of being loved by someone, does the motivation, does that matter? Would it feel different, say, going back to Big Mom?
Yes, sir.
If she loved one of her grandchildren because she felt unloved, and therefore she's thinking by loving this child that the child will return the love to her.
Sometimes, but usually that's not the kind of love that transforms people, because it has such an obvious selfish element in it, right? What we have called Malanaran on past occasion good intentions, they're always counterproductive and they always fail. So I will refer you back to those earlier workshops. But the kind of love that I'm talking about that transforms us is whenever, like Peter or any of these disciples, and not just in the great Christian tradition, this is true in all traditions, you see, whether we're talking about Arjuna and Lord Krishna, you see, or Buddha and Sariputta and Makashyapa, it doesn't matter. What we will find consistent through the experience of all of these great disciples have been the experience of being unconditionally loved, you see. And yes, Big Mama can become that person that unconditionally loves you, you know, and that validates us. That's why it's so important that in our lifetime, you see, the task that we are confronted with as human beings, well, we should be trying to go in terms of the development of our humanity. You remember we talked so much about becoming a first-class human being, is that right? That doesn't mean you dress real nice on stage, because you're all confused about this. Has nothing to do with your appearance to be a first-class human being. To become a first-class human being means that in your life you must have achieved the ability to transmit the experience of unconditional love to at least one other human being. It's profound. Malana Ram, well, our sadhana, our practice of Ahimsa should be predicated in a conscious and deliberate attempt to love at least one human being unconditionally. It could be your child, it could be your wife, it could be your brother, your sister. It doesn't matter. It can be a stranger. But you should be trying to love somebody unconditionally. Just that effort of trying to love somebody unconditionally will cause you to become yourself the recipient of that same kind of love. This is the law of karma. What you want, you must give. That's the law of this universe. You can't, anything that you want, you must first give it. You see? Yes, Sister Judy?
Can you elaborate on the relationship between loving yourself and acts of selflessness?
Yes. When you love yourself, because you have to understand what selfishness is. Selflessness. Okay. Now, when you are being selfless, meaning that you are transcending your own ego. Selflessness is that state where you have transcended that ego that is involved in causing you to violate your own conscience and wisdom. See, your wisdom is not connected with or flowing from your ego. Your ego is nothing but a constellation of your habits, your likes and dislikes. They have created in us a momentum. Now, we like certain things, right? At the physical level, the mental level, etc., right? And we like to indulge in them sensually, right? Pleasure, right? And in this pursuit of pleasure, the ego always pursues pleasure. That's how you know it. Right? It is only and always in pursuit of pleasure. As it relates to where it is at in the hierarchy of development. If your ego is still at the level of your body, and that becomes the locus of your identity, you are more defined in terms of your physicality and your senses, then what you will find is that all your time and energy is spent in trying to fulfill your sensual pleasure. You're strictly into eating and sleeping and sexing. That's all that counts for you in life. Because your ego is at that developmental stage. Are you following me?
Yes.
Okay. And your morality is that anything that interferes with the fulfillment of your sensual pleasure is wrong. And anything that helps you fulfill your sensual pleasure is right. That's the extent of your morality. It goes with that whole developmental stage. As the ego matures a little bit more, and the locus of your identity perhaps shifts, right, to the psychological or the intellectual. Now, that same pleasure drive is spent in the pursuit of knowledge, information, and you enjoy that, just like the lower developed ego enjoy food, sex, and sleep. You see? So you see what I'm saying here? It depends on that. But selflessness is just another name for egolessness, meaning the transcendence of ego. And when you have transcended your ego, only then can you act out of that wisdom and that inner law that brother was talking about. That's the problem when we encounter the scripture. Now you're reading the Quran, you're reading the Bible, you're reading the Dhammapada, you're reading the Bhagavad Gita, you're reading Zen Avesta. In fact, you have memorized this stuff, but you can't follow none of it. For your life, something in you is resistance to following it. You see, you got too much ego. Or let me put it like this, too little ego. Your ego is still too immature to follow Jesus. You have to be very mature. You have to transcend your ego and reach the state of selflessness in order to implicate the teachings of Jesus. How can you implicate it? You see. So, sister, I hope now we have a different definition and twist on this thing. Yes, Satrani?
How is compassion within? What's your definition? How is compassion within?
Again, compassion is a part of Ahimsa. It is the transmission of the experience of being loved to another human being. That is compassion. You see, compassion is very different from sympathy. I don't want you to be confused, Satrani, because very often we confuse the two. Now, sympathy is simply sitting back at your armchair commenting, oh, it's so bad. Black people are suffering over there in Cabrini Green. That's a shame. You know, those people catching it. But you're not going to do nothing. Your insight will not translate into action. You understand me? It's just sympathy. It's intellectual. It's more ego material. Your ego has not evolved and matured to a point where you can empathize, where it includes others. It is really interesting that the ego at its lower stages of development do not have the capacity to include others. That's what makes it selfish. You live your life outside of the context of others. You're not thinking about no other people. You're not concerned about what's happening to these people over in Cabrini Green somewhere. It's sympathy. It's at the level of your intellect. Compassion, satra, is a very different thing. Jesus, the great mystic, said that no love have a man that for a friend that is greater than this willingness to die. The ultimate form of compassion is the willingness to die.
And that doesn't always mean physical death.
Doesn't always mean physical death, but it certainly can include physical death. You see? It certainly can include it. Somewhere in the Bible, I think, again, very beautiful. The Bible is just full of such rich metaphors when we talk about love. You see? I mean, it is probably the supreme reference for talks on love. Now, if you want to have philosophy and metaphysics, then I have to refer you to Buddha, because in that realm we must bow at Buddha's feet. He was supreme, untouchable. You see? But when we're going to talk about love, we have to go back to this Nazareth. You see? And in that Bible, you'll find many stories about the true shepherd. You see? A true shepherd would die for their sheep. You see? Will die for it. A true bodhisattva will die. In fact, that's the whole meaning of bodhisattva. Right? Will die. And that is why the great sage Jesus said that I have died for your sins. It's a beautiful metaphor. It's a beautiful metaphor. Somebody that'll love you enough to die for your own wrong deeds. That's profound. That's profound. That's absolutely profound. And you've not experienced nobody like that. You've not even experienced anybody that was even willing to die for half of your sins indeed. Do you understand? But to encounter a guru that says, I will die for all of your wrongdoings, it's too much. It's too much. Even just intellectually, it's too much. You can imagine now the experience of Peter and Luke and Mark and John and James and all of those early disciples. Here's a teacher, a guru that will lay down his life. Now that's beautiful. You have to be transformed. And when Peter encountered that, Peter was transformed. He was transformed. He became rock-like. They crucified him upside down. He said, I'm not worthy of being crucified like my Lord. You turn me upside down. You understand? Die for this thing. You Christians today won't die for Jesus. Who you kidding? Who you kidding?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a statement. I experienced my mother, and she would always tell us, myself and my two sisters, that we could always come home, and if there's anything at all, we could always talk to her about. And there was an unconditional aspect of her love, and I could get up in the middle of the night with a toothache, and she'd literally stay with me hours until she prayed it away. You know, that's...
Yeah. How did that love feel?
It's just like
let me get you started. I don't want to get you started. But that's what I'm talking about. You see, when you have had the experience of being loved like that, it transforms you. It validates you. It is sweet. It goes beyond words. It's nothing like that. Now, that's how you should be in relationship to yourself. You should always be able to come home to yourself. Always. Yes, sister?
I have a couple of things. When you talked about the ego transcending, and I think I'm clear about this, but a lot of times I get mixed messages. So the ego doesn't go anywhere. It just develops. If you use the word evolve, evolution, that once you reach enlightenment, the ego, it doesn't disappear. It is in fact still there.
Sure.
It is at a more personal level, though.
Absolutely. You've understood it. In fact, Dhamma book really outlines that whole process in the evolution and development of ego as it relates to spiritual progress, because there is a great misconception You see, ego at its level of full maturation is just that stage right beneath the experience of enlightenment or trans-egoic experience. You see, there are experiences in consciousness that is beyond the level of our ego. But in order to access those experiences, we must have evolved to that level. The problem for us, Vanessa, on the path is that our egos are so immature and undeveloped that we can't do anything. I was just saying, for instance, those of us who get initiated, we can't meditate because our ego's at the level of the body. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I'm sleepy. Oh, I need more rest. Oh, but one is going to hurt. Your ego is stuck. You are autistic. Come up out of this low ego. Right?
Right.
You see my point?
I sure do.
All right.
We tend to, when we speak of it, and we speak of it as if it's, first of all, a separate thing, apart, and secondly, like we're going to get rid of it. Like it's a bad thing that we want to get rid of. Right.
It is not a bad thing. Let's squelch that. And that's it. You see, it's only bad in the sense that if you remain stuck. Just like there's nothing wrong with being 2 years old, having a 2 years old mind. But if you are clinging to the mindset of a 2-year-old and you 50 years old, you are in trouble. Now that's bad. You see. But it's very appropriate for a 2-year-old. Right? And similarly, these lower stages of ego development are very appropriate. We need them. But you have to understand that we have to transcend that whole lower complex of our being in order to move into the higher dimensions of our being. It is ego that even brings us to the path. It is your ego that is making you pursue religion and spirituality. Because your ego wants to experience the pleasures of enlightenment. And that is what drives you. Interesting. So the ego, you see, is necessary.
Also, about ego,
We're going to do an ego workshop?
No. Just that you said that ego is that the pursuit of pleasure, but it's also that avoids pain too, right? So
Same concept.
The other thing, when you talk about the experience and demonstrating harmlessness toward others, like the Ahimsa, also, when you do that, you are experiencing harmlessness towards yourself, because if you hurt someone, you're going to hurt yourself. I mean,
yes.
you're going to experience some stuff yourself.
Yes.
So, in fact, when you are practicing Ahimsa toward other living sentient beings, then you are, in fact, practicing.
Absolutely right. I mean, from a higher perspective, and I follow you precisely, if you did not hear her proposition, it was simply the fact that since the reality of being separate is just an illusion, that in fact that everything is always an expression of this one thing, self. That when you injure another person, when you fail to practice Ahimsa toward the other person, you are in fact harming yourself. By definition, you just don't know it. You have harmed yourself because you have done an act that was harmful, and the law of karma mandates that you must reap that. So even if you don't understand the eloquent model that you've just drawn out, if you can understand the law of karma and that you will reap what you sow, and if you fail to practice harmlessness toward other people, you will experience the consequence of all pain, suffering, and misery that your failure to practice Ahimsa produces. And it will come back and it will descend on you. So you're absolutely right, either way you look at it. We must practice this Ahimsa. Mr. Maharaji used to always say that the greatest sin in the world is to hurt the feelings of what you're calling the other human being, because actually you're hurting yourself. Yes, I'm sorry.
So then too, when we hurt ourselves, we actually hurt that other human being.
Again, when we hurt ourselves, we are also hurting the other human being. Because when we fail to love ourselves, we don't develop ourselves. And we've said on so many occasions, Ahimsa, that that which is divine in us comes packaged with so many talents and benefits, if we but manifest it, that will help relieve the suffering of other human beings. And so when we don't even love ourselves enough to develop our own innate divinity, we are depriving other people of spiritual substance. And you will suffer for that. You creating very vast negative karma. Can you understand what it's like if you had $1 million inside of your pocket and you walking around stepping over people who are starving? And especially if God has given you the $1 million for the express purpose of feeding the hungry. And you refuse to do that because it causes you to go against your ego. You will be punished because you are robbing people. In the same way, I'm sorry, the Supreme Being has put something in you that is just absolutely magnificent, inscrutable, cannot be captured even in words. A part of Himself is in you. And if you fail to develop that and manifest it and let it flow out into your life, what we call Ahimsa, love and kindness, then the consequences is much suffer. Much suffer. So again, very right. Yes, Judy?
This may sound crazy, and I wonder...
You're in the right place when you talk crazy here. Not to worry.
But, I call myself a spiritual person, and this may sound really odd, and I've always said, I know this sounds crazy, but this is what I feel. When I'm an animal lover, I love all animals, I love nature. And if I'm driving down the street and I see roadkill, I kind of say a prayer and bless that soul. Now, does that sound crazy?
No, it doesn't sound crazy. You see, it doesn't sound crazy at all. You see, one has to examine a lot of things. Now, simply saying a prayer for roadkill is not a convincing demonstration of your love for animals. First of all, right? The first question is, are you doing any harmful things to animals?
Am I what?
Are you doing any harmful things to them? Are you eating them? Are you barbecuing them? Are you putting them in freezer? Then you see that contradiction, that whole compassion. Not to embarrass you, and don't misunderstand me, because it's not about that. It's just that clarifying in our minds our own tendency to deceive ourselves in these matters, you see. And that's good. It begins there. So don't stop uttering a prayer for the roadkill. But now let your compassion for animals mature. Let it grow so that it begins to include, I'm not going to chop your head off just to appease my appetite. I'm not going to put you on some charcoal and pour some ketchup on you and roast you, right? Just so that I can smack my lips. I'm not going to do that. I love you too much. I respect you. You have a right to life as well as I do. You have been brought into existence by that same Creator who have brought me into this creature. And I respect you and I love you. And I'm not going to do that to you. I'd rather suffer the sacrifices of my palate and eat dry bread and drink water before I harm one of the least of you. That kind of thing. Let it grow. You're in the right place. Start there. Man, that's beautiful. Man, that's beautiful because some people are not only barbecuing, they're not saying any prayers. They run over the roadkill again and again and again, right? So that's good sign. And you're right, you are spiritual in the sense that you even can have that kind of mindset, that you can even feel a little bit. That means that something in you spiritual is opening up. It's beginning to happen to you. Good sign, not to worry. Just cooperate with that. Let it fully manifest it. You see? And a time will come then when that same compassion will be there for human beings, for all sentient beings, for nature, everything. You see? And that's what it means to become fully spiritual. So quite the contrary, sister. That's not crazy, unless becoming enlightened is crazy. And of course, some feel that if you become enlightened, you are technically crazy. Yes, I'm sorry.
Some of us have been taught that the animals have been put here for that express purpose. So
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
say something about that?
Well, man and womankind have found all kinds of ways to justify their brutality. Because they are able to justify it doesn't necessarily make it right. There wasn't too long ago when they justified enslaving us, depriving us of even the right to be a human being. Black people was made to be enslaved, to be killed, to be brutalized. And they used the same spiritual scriptures to justify that as they did to justify the abuse of nature. So one is must be very suspicious about any scriptures that legitimatize and promote abuse, violence, murder, killing. That's not Ahimsa. And we know that's not the teachings of Jesus or Lord. Yes, sister? 29 verse, I believe, in Genesis, yes. Yes, my love. We're talking about Ahimsa. Huh? Yes.
I want to know the impact, the difference of us not eating meat, but yet wearing leather shoes or leather bracelets.
If one wants to avoid all of that, again, these are developmental stages. In fact, the Jains do not wear leather. And some of the Hebrew Israelites, too, as Kiva continues, do not wear leather at all. In fact, they practice radical vegetarianism, veganism. They won't even take milk or any milk products, anything that come from an animal. So it depends on how far the person want to go. Now, you have to understand that vegetarianism is not an end in itself, and that has become a problem here in the West. It's preparation. But like anything that's been introduced without a guru, it gets blown way out of proportion somewhere. So now you have people who are following vegetarianism like it's a religion. Let me make a point very clear. You can become a perfect vegan and you're no closer to enlightenment than anybody else. If vegan or vegetarianism made people enlightened, then there would be millions of enlightened people. Hitler was a vegetarian, and probably a stricter one than any of you in this room. Yet he murdered millions of people. You see, we have a wrong understanding. Vegetarianism is a preparation. The thing, though, the real thing that counts is meditation. Right? It's meditation. So in that case, the advice that the Buddha gives is the best advice, right in the middle. You see, anytime you're at an extreme, you are in trouble in anything. All right, everything needs to be balanced. Yes, Pat?
You mentioned about unconditional love.
Acha.
And my question is, are we as humans capable of this unconditional love, of this agape love that Jesus, part one? And part two is, you also mentioned that there is no you in love. That when you love,
there's no I.
There's no I.
Yes.
Right. I want you to clarify.
Yes. On your first point, of course we're born with the potential because we've been made in the image of God. Being made in the image of God means that we possess all of the qualities of God, just in a miniature level. But they're there. We're made of the same stuff as God. And therefore, in our very makeup, we carry these same abilities. Yes, not only can we love radically, that's our task, is to love radically. And until we learn how to do that, we keep coming back again and again into this creation. That is the one lesson that we are all here to learn, is how to love. There is no other lesson in life, you see. So we have that potential. It's inherent in our nature. Now, the second question is much like the first one. When you have achieved that experience, there is no I. Simply meaning that when you are in a relationship of Ahimsa, when you are transmitting the experience of unconditional love to another human being or any sentient being, there is no I there. There is no ego there. You have transcended the ego. You're not even thinking about you. In that sense, there's no I. You see? There's no awareness of you as a separate entity. All of your attention is focused in on that other being. You lose complete awareness of yourself. It's very interesting. You'll notice, Pat, that when we are in a movie or at a concert and we're really enjoying the drama or the singing, you forget you even in the seat. You forget where you at. Whenever we're having these higher experiences, like the experience of beauty, you forget that you are even here. You forget all about yourself. In fact, it is this forgetting of oneself that produced the experience of ecstasy. The word itself, ecstasy, means to step outside of self. That's what the word literally means. So whenever we're able to move beyond our ego, we automatically have an ecstatic experience. You see? So it's very beautiful when we're really able, Pat, to really transmit the experience of being loved to another human being. It makes us have an experience of happiness. Now, that's a hard thing to understand because I'm not talking about I. I'm talking about just that feeling of I is just replaced with an experience of bliss. It's a blissful thing. it can become very addictive. Hmm? Yes, Emma?
I have a question for Ahimsa.
I-
To really start practicing Ahimsa toward yourself, besides meditation, how else would that blossom? I mean, for Ahimsa, you know, if you're overweight, you lose 50 pounds, that's Ahimsa. Or if you're smoking, you stop smoking, you know, you're practicing harmlessness toward yourself. But how else will that evolve in a spiritual way to make it really blossom out into true Ahimsa? Because you can treat other people good.
Yeah.
That's not the same if it's
No,
not
it's not.
blossoming out of your own self-experience.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. First of all, our practice of Ahimsa, our sadhana of Ahimsa, will always be a reflection of our own wisdom and conscience. Now, if your conscience telling you that, Emma, you should not smoke, then you should not smoke. You see, that's clear. Your conscience is telling you this is not good for you. You yourself, no one has to tell you that, right? And if you're really going to practice some Ahimsa, you're going to have to do that. Now, somebody else may be smoking and they don't have that level of wisdom. What can they do? You see, they may be at a lower stage somewhere, right? So this is something that is really relative to each and every individual. That's why Brother gave us such a tremendous insight when he was talking about the fact that we got to follow some kind of law, right? Now, there's an inner law that we all have that is manifest in the form of our conscience. Your conscience is the law manifested in you. And that is the thing to follow. Now, it's really interesting that all of the physical scriptures of the world contain these kind of dictations, don't they, about do's and don'ts. We have the negative confessions in Egyptian mysticism, right? We have the Ten Commandments and so forth and so on. All spiritual systems have built into their literature a reflection of this inner conscience, right? And that's why we're able to relate to it, right? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. We're able to resonate with that because our own inner law confirms the validity of those teachings, right? So in the same way, if your inner wisdom, what in Sat Ma'at we call the Sat Guru, the true teacher, because these Bibles are not the truest teaching. The true teacher is inside you in the form of your own wisdom. That is the Sat Guru. And if the Sat Guru inside, in the form of your wisdom, it says, Emma, don't do this. This is not good for you. Remember, it says not good for you. Then you, in order to bring yourself into a true state of Ahimsa with yourself, you must do that. You see, whether anybody else smoke or not is not the issue, right? It's not a group consensus. The same as is losing weight. Now, if your inner wisdom tells you that this stuff is killing me, right? I got to lose this weight. Doctor already told me if I don't lose 25 pounds, you know, my heart is going to explode one day, right? Or whatever it is. But deep down inside you, you are convicted. You know that I got to lose this weight. Then losing weight becomes a spiritual thing, right? You got to do that. And if you don't obey your conscience, your inner Sadguru, you will suffer. It's as simple as that. And once you start getting accustomed to obeying your inner Sadguru, that obedience now spreads out into all dimensions of your life. You see? It turns into what we call devotion. It's a very beautiful phenomenon. And it is this devotion now that transforms. You see? You get in the habit now. You start developing the habit of following your own intuition. And if we can get into the habit of following our own intuition, rather than our lower stages of ego development, and this preoccupation with pleasures, right? Then that is what it means to be on the path. To be on the path means that we have consciously decided from this point on we're going to follow our wisdom, right? Does it mean that we won't have some trips and fall? Of course, you're going to trip and fall some places. But essentially, you're falling upward. You got a goal. You're on purpose. You know where you're going now. You're very clear about this thing. Your goal in life is to become in harmony with this inner Sadguru. What the African mystics and what we in this teaching on Sat Ma'at calls Ma'at. You're trying to come into Ma'at, into balance, into harmony with this inner Sadguru. You see? So yes, if smoking is there, it must go. Now it must go. And it's an interesting thing, when your devotion becomes right, these things fall away. that are inconsistent. You know Johnny, our friend, and when Johnny first heard teachings on vegetarianism, Johnny instantly went to his refrigerator, threw out all his meat. He had just made groceries, wiped it out. His soul was at a point where it understood that teaching, right? Now there's other parts that he struggled with of the teachings. Make no doubt about that. We all are struggling with some part of the teaching initially. But there are those other instances where we clearly had no trouble. Now, you might have taken a drink every now and then or smoked a little reefer, but you had no trouble dropping that. You see my point? So one mustn't take this out of perspective, you see. But by starting to develop this habit, you see, of following this inner wisdom, this sattva, then we're able to eventually follow it all the way throughout our life. And that's what yes, sister.
In your workshop last night, you mentioned...
That was a good workshop last night, huh?
Yeah, anger workshop. You mentioned this person is always arguing and fighting and battling with someone. Well, this person is angry all the time. Can this person really practice Ahimsa? Wouldn't this person have to clean out that
Yes.
excess baggage?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And how would meditation fit into this person's life? You would have to do some cleaning up.
Oh, yes. Oh, you asked some deep questions here today. I'm happy that these questions are coming. You're absolutely right. Therein lies the problem with anger, is that anger and the actions that flow from anger when it is mismanaged, right, are always destructive. Its aim is to destroy. It is just the opposite of Ahimsa. When you're angry and you're mismanaging it, your mind is driven with the urge to hurt that other human being as a means of giving yourself some relief. It's just the opposite, right? And even sometime after you hurt that human being, your wisdom come back and say, you know you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't even said that. You shouldn't even have done that. So when you are acting out of your own uncontrolled rage and fear, you are definitely out of compliance with your own inner wisdom, and you suffer. Because now you start becoming filled with guilt and remorse. You're sorry about it now. And worse, you have to undergo those consequences. Because the law of karma does not care that you don't have good anger management abilities. You must still undergo the consequences of those acts of rage. You see? And so now the whole thing becomes further complicated. You ask, how do meditation help us? Because meditation accelerates us beyond just the lower stages of egoic development into a state of selflessness where we are truly liberated from the impulses to follow these things. And now we can act out of our wisdom. Meditation gives us the capacity to act out of our wisdom. It is a way to accelerate that whole evolution of ego to that level where we're now able to transcend it entirely. So meditation becomes the most effective means for us to achieve these levels of mastery. Short answer. Yes, Sister Amy.
When you started, I think you said that there were levels of Ahimsa. And we talked about 2 levels. And what I'm thinking is that, and which might be, totally wrong, but as long as you mentioned, we each have a unique, that's something that we have that unless we find it and share it, we really have not practiced true Ahimsa because we are hurting ourselves unknowingly because, that's how we pick the wrong people and working the wrong jobs, do all this other kind of stuff. So we're hurting ourselves unknowingly unless we actively seek that within us, which is our true self, so that we can really then practice.
Absolutely. And this was the insight of Aung San. Aung San again was saying that inside of us is this Dharma, this tremendous thing. That is the absolute opposite of the ignorance. When we don't know our Dharma, you are functioning out of a state of ignorance, which means by definition you will always be doing those things that will be injurious to you and to others. Because fundamentally you are in a state of ignorance. Right? So anything you do will be wrong. It's very interesting, Sister Edwina. The Maharaji used to say, until you come to at least beyond the ego, right, to what we call the I center, to Trikuti, right, everything you do will be wrong. This is profound. It's not a question of you doing something right. You are unenlightened. Everything, with no exception that you do, will be wrong. Because it's issuing out of your unenlightenment. Now, Unc Saab, you raised this issue. You blame Unc Saab for this. If not, I could have remained silent on that. You see, but he started it. I'm just finishing. But that's the truth, if the truth be known. If one has not discovered this divine potentia within oneself and liberated it through the process of meditation and come into this state called enlightenment, then by definition, everything that you do will be wrong because it is flowing out of your own ignorance. You will pick the wrong wife, the wrong husband, the wrong job, the wrong neighborhood to live in. Everything you do will be wrong. Wrong in the sense that none of it will fulfill you. And that's the ultimate measurement of a wrong act. You're not fulfilled. You're not at peace. You're not full of ananda. You're not full of joy. That means you are living out of alignment somewhere. If you're living righteously, you will automatically, by definition, be filled with bliss. Make no mistake about that. And I want to emphasize that because, again, when we come into the church and things of that nature, we start using this terminology very loosely. You know, I'm righteous. I'm a righteous person. This is nonsense. You're too miserable to be righteous. How can you be righteous and you're full of so much misery? What does misery have to do with righteousness? If you are indeed righteous, then you will be just blissful. Just absolutely blissful. In the true sense of the word righteous. What we mean by righteous means that I'm making the effort, I'm going to church, I'm reading the scripture. That don't make you righteous. You just going to church, reading the scripture, memorizing a few quotes. Nothing bad as such, but don't confuse that with righteousness. Because if you do, you will never pursue the real kind of righteousness that the Bible is talking about. So you're absolutely right, Sister Edwina. Unless we get in touch with this divine thing in us that contains all of our greatest qualities and aspects, and manifest that, liberate it, become enlightened, then by definition, you can't do anything. That's why it's so important in the teachings to follow the instructions of the Guru. Why do the mystics put so much emphasis on that? They put an emphasis on that because you don't have access to right action. You better follow the advice of these Buddhas, of these Jesus, these Mahavir, these Muhammads. You see? Benefit from their enlightenment. And follow that. You see? But if not, if you want to follow your own mind, as most of you want to do, then you are doomed to the consequences of those actions. Now, you don't know anything about spiritual development, but you've invented your own path. You've adjusted here, adjusted there, changed the times around. But I don't have to meditate no 2.5 hours. Hell, I'm meditating 15 minutes. That's good enough. I don't see why I can't make spiritual progress meditating 15 minutes a day. And let me meditate any other time I want. I ain't got to do it just like he said do it. When you have this kind of mindset, you don't understand. You don't know nothing. You don't know anything. You don't even know how to follow no path. You don't have a clue. You're just moving out of some more of your own ignorance. You see? So, all of these kind of things, you see, sister, are important that we understand that. If we're a Christian, we must follow Jesus. You must follow that. Don't play with it. Don't edit it. Don't talk about, oh, that was 2,000 years ago, I got a modern that. No. Don't take those kind of liberties. And that is, of course, the problem with following a past master, that Jesus is not here in the flesh like he was with those beloved early disciples to correct your deviations. And so we tend to just run in all kinds of wrong ways. A few more. Let's hear from my sister right then. I'll come back to you. Yes,
I
sister?
just do. Assess the definition of enlightenment, and are there stages of enlightenment?
Oh, you'd never ask a small question, huh? Yes, there are degrees, stages, and things of that nature if you want to look at it like that. And then again, there are no stages and degrees. It depends on how we wish to talk about this thing. Let me first say a few words about enlightenment and meditation and all this stuff here, for those of you who are not familiar with it. Actually, you see, what is it that we're trying to do at the time of our meditation? What we're trying to do, sister, we are consciously and deliberately inducing a near-death experience. We are literally dying while living. In Scripture, Paul says, I die daily. That, again, is a metaphor that describes meditation. Paul was saying, I do meditation every day, like I've been telling you to do, you see. And that he do real meditation, because when the meditation is real and done correctly, it produces the same experiences that are undergone in a near-death experience. Now, the beauty of that is this, is that now, just like those who accidentally have the near-death experience are able to encounter the light and all of these other things and come back totally transformed, you're able to do the same thing. What happens as a result of effective meditation is you conquer your fear of death and dying. Now, we've done a whole workshop on the Bados, and there's the Bado book. You must have read it, sister. And in that book, that's all that we're talking about, right? That which goes on at the time of death and dying. And meditation gives you the ability to have that whole experience now while living. And that completely changes your whole worldview. It pushes you all the way through those lower ego stages into the trans-egoic stages, right? You are no longer the same person. As many people who have had near-death experiences will tell you, when they come back from that experience, they're not the same. These people are transformed. They don't even have the same set of priorities no more. You see? So similarly, and that's just a one-time experience. Now imagine if you're able to go into these regions daily and go in deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into those regions. It produces a different you. And that is the whole purpose, you see. We are preparing ourselves for death. I'm a student of philosophy, as you know. That was my major in college. And one of the things that I love much about Plato and much about the Greek philosophers, that Plato's definition of philosophy were very unique. Plato, like Socrates, defined philosophy as learning how to die. And when I read that, I said, I knew this is what I need to major in, is how to die, because I'm going to die. And that was my first real encounter with that. So then you begin to see now this link of meditation with this whole business about dying and how it relates. If you are meditating thinking that you are doing something in some kind of worshipful way to alter, if you're creating good karma. Some of you meditating, you say, well, I guess I get to meditate and create me some good karma. I'm meditating so that I can somehow circumvent the law of karma so nothing bad will happen to me. You have not understood meditation. You are going through your karma, period. Right? Meditation has nothing to do with interfering with the outcome of your prior action. You are going through that thing. Right? Meditation is not like a talisman that you wear around your neck. It's not a good luck charm. You see? It has nothing to do with none of that stuff. Meditation is the deliberate and conscious inducing of the near-death experiences for purposes of conquering your fear of death and dying. That's what meditation is about. Yes, brother?
Yes,
In my heart, I haven't forgotten you.
There was part of the Bible that Jesus said that we must overcome the world. I would like to elaborate on this here. Do you feel that we must detach from the world and from ourselves to reach this infinite wisdom?
Well, I can't even add anything to that, brother. You have summed it all up. Absolutely, you must detach. You must detach. Meaning that this ego must break its infatuation with an inebriation of this world. You see, all of your attention is going out into the world to fulfill the ambitions and dictates of the ego. And we want to go in here, right? Into the body. This is the temple of God. This is where the kingdom of heaven is at. We want to go into here. As long as we're in the world, in the sense that all of our attention and time and energy is spent in the world. And this, brother, becomes the problem. I'm so happy you came today to ask me these kind of questions. Because this becomes the problem even once we have been initiated and given the means of coming into our own kingdom of heaven inside ourselves. Our problem still remains with the world. We become so busy out here, so caught up in all this trivia and this nonsense and this bullshit, that we can't find no time to meditate. Now, what is a couple hours a day? Now, how hard is that? Really? That's not much time. But you can't find no time. You're out of time. Why are you out of time? Why are you having such a hard time finding time to meditate? Because you're wasting all your time on trivia in this world. You are caught up in this world. And you don't understand this world ain't going nowhere with you. You can't take nothing. You can't take these kids. You can't take your job. You can't take nothing with you. You came in here empty-handed, and you are going out of here empty-handed. And if you have not found the answer to these mysteries during that interim, you have, in effect, wasted your whole human life, and you wasted it on trivia. Now, we're not saying don't enjoy life. Don't misunderstand me. But you should not be so preoccupied with the world that you don't have time to take care of your spiritual business. That's what I'm talking about. It's like a person that goes to work all weeks, get paid on a Friday, before they get home, they done drank the money up, gambled it away, spent it in some shopping mall, get home and they can't even buy groceries for the next week. They don't even have bus fare or gas money. They can't pay none of the utility. You have squandered your paycheck on the world. In the same way, the Lord has given you only so many breaths. You're not going to have this body forever. It's going to come to an end. And what have you done with the breath that the Lord has given you? You have wasted it watching TV, brushing your teeth. You're so busy brushing your teeth, you can't meditate. What is that? Fixing your hair, doing your laundry. These are the kind of things you're worried about. You're not worried about the eventual liberation of your soul. We got caught up in the world. And it's very hard to break that because our ego justifies. Well, you know, I got to make a living, but one. I mean, I got to do all these things. I mean, and you're right. You do. You got more than enough time to spend on this trivia. But you also have been given the opportunity to meditate, and you got enough time. There is never any excuse for not finding at least 2.5 hours a day to devote towards your spiritual development. Let me underscore that. Let me make this thing plain, because many of y'all do not understand this. There ain't nothing that you're doing out here more important than your meditation. Nothing. Don't even write to me about that. Don't even mention that to me. Don't insult me. Don't play me for a fool. Don't think I'm that unintelligent. You have no justification for missing any meditation. Period. And you're absolutely right. As long as you are caught up in this world, you cannot become enlightened. Because how would you find time to practice? You can't even go to church. You can't even go to church. What is with that? What is? Yes, Mom.
Well, I'm kind of going back to love where you lose yourself.
Yes.
Focus
Yes.
on the person that you love. And I mention it only because sometimes I see where you are channeling and directing your love at an individual. And you're not thinking about yourself. And you know that love conquers all. And you're hoping that love
Who's hoping?
changes.
You hoping that something changes.
You want to.
So you're involved in a business transaction.
So
You understand?
Your love is good intention.
Yeah. Listen to me. You using love as a smoke screen to fulfill your own separate ambition. You're using treating people nice as a means to manipulate them and to fulfilling some expectation. That's not it.
So if you're in an abusive relationship, then it's your own selfish or
Right.
your good intentions.
That's all.
So does anybody? I'm still stuck on love. I don't even think that anybody practices.
That's what I've been saying. That's the whole insight. My art, now you see. Love and the practice of love is the rarest phenomenon you will find on this planet. You're absolutely right. Now you need to really reflect on that. Now you need to leave here, go get a cup of tea, and this your sister. Take sister with you, buy some tea, go on over to the Soul Vegetarian Restaurant, sit out in the corner, and drink some tea long and deep on this thing. Because you're right. This is the insight. This is the insight. That you have to become enlightened. You have to wake up. You have to come to this state. It's almost like asking a question in a dream. Now, in a dream, a monster is chasing you, and you're running hither and thither. And in the dream, you're saying, "Oh, but one, how do I escape this monster?" What can I tell you other than wake up? It's all an illusion. It's not real. Wake up. It's drama, low order drama. There is no way to love unless you become enlightened. This is my whole point. So if you truly are desirous of becoming a bhakta, a lover, you must become enlightened. That's the whole point. And I'm glad you represent the breakthrough so that the rest of us can really understand that drop this whole effort to become lovers, but avoid becoming enlightened. See, we're so clever, so slick, that we're going to try to become lovers and all of these things, but we are going to avoid meditation and those things that will produce enlightenment. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Now accept that. Or get busy. That's your only choice. But certainly you're not confused any longer. Yes?
I'm still confused.
You're a little confused.
So, you talked about love unconditionally. Like, my thought was, I have experienced loving my children. I thought experience of just unconditional love. I mean, almost scary because, old folks tell you love somebody too much, God will take it from you, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So I've had that experience, right? Then on the other hand, because I've chosen this path, and I know that the love and Ahimsa would have me, this love that I have for my children, this would be right. So the differentiation, the attachment.
Right. You see, it's confined to your children.
Right.
That's because of the attachment. It's a lower spiritual state. And when one becomes enlightened, the same feeling that you have for your children is felt by every sentient being. It's very interesting that
I think that I would want that.
Do you think that you would want that? You might not want that.
I mean, it's so beautiful that you would think you would want it.
You would think you would want it.
But what I find myself many times is not. It's like taking something from my children. Do you get?
I understand. You think that love is a quantity, it's a quantifiable thing.
Yeah, it must be. Because,
right.
I mean, that's
that it's an amount of love. Love is infinite. You have enough love in you to love every sentient being on this planet. All that is happening, you're using a tiny little infinitesimally small piece of your capacity to love. You've limited to 2 or 3 kids, right? You're at the lowest manifestation of your capacity to love. Here, you are in a state of attachment. Now, even though that's a low thing, but the mystics, saints, and sages in their literature has always used the love that a mother has for their child as the best way to try to get an understanding of what they're talking about. They were saying that just that feeling that you talked about, that you feel for your children, because you'll die for these kids, and I know that. You'll die. You'll lay down your life for it. Satrani, she will do that for her children, as any mother would do. And that is probably the highest metaphor for what is meant by love available at this level of consciousness. Is the love of a mother for a child. That's the highest that unenlightened people are capable of. You can't go higher than that. You see? And it is like that higher love. You see? But only like that by analogy. But if you want to compare it to, it would be like comparing muddy water to a pristine pool of nectar. You see? Because your love is that's just attachment. Real high attachment. You are in a high state of attachment. Intense attachment. But that feels good. But when we are able to, as a result of our meditation, transcend these lower egoic stages, come into this near-death experience that reprioritizes our life. One of the things that people who go survive a near-death experience is more loving kindness toward everybody. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that? They become more loving across the board. Just that's just one hit. Now imagine if you could get a hit every day. Right? Yes, but I think
So also what I'm understanding is that what I sometimes am afraid of with that is that it would seem like the people that you love or that we think that we love, that we're using that word with, we're not loving them any less when our love expands and that attachment withdraws. We're not loving them any less, and it seems as if, that's what we're afraid of losing. Like I love you, and then I love everybody else, but I really love you.
Right, right.
And by letting go of that attachment, what we do is we encompass the love. The love is encompass everybody.
It expands.
It expands, and we're not loving less the one object. We're just loving everything as much or more.
Absolutely, good analogy.
Yeah.
You're not in a transaction called love. There's never any loss.
Yeah.
And so we have a wrong mathematics. Now, for instance, if I'm giving you money, that money is a very physical thing, right? It's a quantity. So if I got $100 and I give you 50, I've lost $50. There's a loss in the transactions that are material, right? However, if I give from the next level, if I give you some of my knowledge, right? I don't lose any of my knowledge, right? I still have the same knowledge. I've just shared it with you. When I give you my love, not only have I not lost anything, I actually gained something because it triggers your love back to me.
Yeah.
So the more you love, the more love you experience. It's blissful. The yogis in the East have called it Mahamudra. It's like having an orgasm at the level of the mind. It's too much. Now you know how good it feels on Mother's Day when those kids of yours come, right, and play homage to you. Can you imagine if the whole neighborhood came and paid homage to you on Mother's Day and telling your mama, you see, I love you. You couldn't stand that. That killed you. You couldn't handle it. It's too much. You'll faint. But that's what's in store. So you're right, Bharataji. The mathematics of love is very different from the mathematics of materialism. And we keep confusing the two. Hence our hesitancy to love. To even make the attempt. I think we'll have one or two more questions and then I'll let you enjoy. Yes, Sister Louise.
I would like
And
to
this
know,
sister.
all right, this brother I know, he's recently, say within a year, has become a born-again Christian. And he's working and he's like, he takes his money and gives it all to the poor, people who are, in need or whatever. And he depends on his brothers and them to take care of him. And he doesn't really keep hardly any for himself. Don't get any. He says the Lord will feed me. So I didn't know what to tell his brother. Only I can say is that's a question for about one.
That's smart, right? Well, actually, you see, any acts of compassion and goodness we are not to discourage. But in time, you see, because he's just giving away money right now. You see, he's just a beginner in this business, so to speak. All of this will come out. One of the things you see in the practice of Ahimsa is not to become a burden on another person. Hence, when you come to the path, very often the Guru insists you get you a job. Now, some of you have come unemployed. I have not said it to all, but certainly to some. And I've told you, get you a job, become functional, so that you cease being a burden on people financially, because that's an act that is the opposite of Ahimsa. Why are you draining another person's resources? There's nothing wrong with you. Get up off your ass and get out and make a living. Right? Don't be worried about developing all these other high spiritual qualities. First, you become functional. You see? Don't make yourself a burden on nobody, because that is an act of harmfulness. It's just that this brother, you see, don't really understand Ahimsa. But he wants to do Ahimsa. So we mustn't throw out the baby with the dirty bath. You see. You see, just point out to him a few things that he would want to take under consideration and show him how. It doesn't make much progress, you see, to give money like Robin Hood to the poor and then rob the rich. That is not a heroic act. You see, actually you are implementing them in a crime, right? The best thing to do, you see, is to also confer his Ahimsa on his own brothers. Why can't he do that? Right? See, he hasn't understood this thing. You see, because sometimes it works just the opposite. Now we want to go out and help all of these people that are non-connected to our family, but your own brothers and sisters, you don't do nothing for. You have not understood it. Why shouldn't your brothers and your sisters and your own children and members of your own household be the recipients of your love and kindness? Why not? Why not? What is that? Now, that's your sister. How can you pass over her in your love of humanity and claim that that love of humanity is genuine when you can't even love your sister? This is madness. This is madness. He doesn't understand, sister. Make him understand. Better show him by example. You making him put his hand up, sister. Now, what question you have that Ahimsa would ask? Go ahead. He's really got a question. Okay.
Okay. I think I have a statement.
He has a statement.
Points and experience. I was a member of a fellowship that at one stage it talks about going out helping other people. And in me doing that, it didn't make a difference about the other people. As a matter of fact, one experience I shared often is that there's a pod where people come up and hug you. And this was some years ago when they had jerry curls and the stuff that was in people's hair used to irritate me.
Yes.
But whenever I would hug these people and their hair would get on me, after the experience was over, I wouldn't be irritated. And there was people who you could look at and tell this person smells. You know, homeless, they stink. But my way of being would be such that, come on, because this is what you need, and I would hug them, and I couldn't smell them. You know, it was remarkable during this time, like the 5-minute period of time. It was just come on up here and get this.
You transcended your allergy.
Allergy.
Love transcended your allergy.
Right.
Beautiful.
Couldn't smell them.
Couldn't do anything. Couldn't hurt you.
Right. That's the way it seemed for this length of time. And and people still remember me from that. They see me now. I say, yeah, I remember. And I don't remember. Well, yeah, because I would look like, oh yeah, that's right. You was the stink bomb. But it was at these times that I felt this closeness with him. And when I hugged him, it was like hugging one of my children. It was no the feeling of what you call the unconditional love. I see was there. Now, one thing, it only lasted for this period of time that I was standing there doing this particular act. And once that was over, judgment came back in. All of the stage of the ego, I guess I dropped back into the lower stages or whatever.
But it's better than having spent no time in that zone. You imagine, Ahimsa, that many of us will spend a whole lifetime and we'll never spend 1 second outside of the selfish zone. Even just a few minutes, a few episodes, you see, is worth, 100 lifetimes of living in the selfish zone. And you're right. There are cities, abilities that come to enable us to practice this kind of radical love, this Ahimsa, right? And again, it's good to always try to find and practice Ahimsa with a human being. This ability to transmit to them the experience of being loved. It cleaned the brothers up. You didn't even recognize them. It cleaned them up so much. You don't know what that one fleeting second of tender, genuine love and acceptance did for that person. It renewed them. gave them a sense of real value in what they were doing. So these things are good things. These are great things. Now to just keep doing that since you know that that works. So instead of trying to change people with all of your arguments now, just go back to hugging. Simple. I think one more, brother. One more. We must end.
I like to go all the way back to the beginning.
I didn't. Oh, this sister had a question. Sister, you still have your question too? Well, you can see me afterward, but we'll let the group because some people have places to go. Yes, brother. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead and finish your comment.
Okay. I want to say, I want to go back over to the beginning, to Adam and Eve.
Oh no! Oh God! Then we'll wait till afterward. I'll wait around for you. Rashe Kaman.
Rashe Kaman.
Everybody just need to